Hey guys, I am Shane. I'm here with Al Staehely.
Hey Shane, good to see you,
Good to
man.
see you as always. So I always start these little things off with just going kind of over a history of you and the Mucky Duck. So when did you start playing here? When did you know about us? All that kind
Well,
of stuff.
I knew about it long before I started playing here, but actually, when I first knew about it, I kind of wasn't performing anymore. I took about 20 years off when my son was born, and
Yeah, that's what does it, I guess.
raised a kid. And then when he went off to college, I started performing again. But I've been playing the Mucky Duck. I don't know, maybe 10 years now.
Yeah, it seems like it's been a while. So I've been seeing you, and now your son's grown up, comes here, drinks. He's getting
That's,
married. Is he getting
he's
married?
got I got two little granddaughters under
Oh,
the
okay.
age 3. He's
Oh,
a pretty busy
he's
guy now.
busy. I know nothing about that. All right, we'll get into these questions I got for you. So, do you remember the first and last record that you purchased? Any format?
The first record I purchased, gosh, I don't know. I remember the first record my brother purchased,
Well, let's do that one.
which was is pretty unusual because for a kid who was just a kid, and it was remember that song. It's totally it's totally inappropriate nowadays. It's called "If You Want to Be Happy for the Rest of Your Life,
I don't know that.
Never Make a Pretty Woman Your Wife."
never, I never heard that song.
I bet
Who sang
Rusty
it?
remembers.
Who sang that?
From my personal point of view, get an ugly girl to marry you was the thing. Uh, and he was about, I don't know, he was about 10 or something, thought that was the greatest song in the world.
Who recorded that? You remember?
You know, I can't remember, but I know you can look it up.
I've never heard that. Yeah, that's probably something that's been buried somewhere.
But I'll tell you, an early record, and ties in with Houston, uh, that my mother bought. Okay, Johnny Nash, because we all know Johnny Nash from I
Mhm.
Can See Clearly Now. But before that, they were trying to make him like the new Johnny Mathis or something.
Mhm.
And my mother had heard a Johnny Nash record on the radio and went out and bought the album. And it was a great album in that sort of Johnny Mathis vein. Okay, then I never heard any more about Johnny Nash until uh, I guess I was living in LA, and all of a sudden I Can See Clearly Now comes out and it says Johnny Nash. I'm thinking, is that the same Johnny Nash?
Right.
And it was the same Johnny Nash. Now, fast forward 30 years, maybe, 25 at least. As you know, I'm an entertainment lawyer
Right.
nowadays, as well as playing for you guys. Uh, Johnny Nash became a client of mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Wait a minute. The phone is going off here.
It's all right.
And my mother still had that album, and I got him to autograph that album for my
Well, that's
mother.
pretty. That's pretty cool. That same record.
It's the same record.
That's cool. So I mean, that's probably a whole nother conversation we can have about your past life and spirit and growing up in that California kind of scene.
Well, actually, no. I grew up in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
I'm like a third generation Austinite. My brother and I.
So when did you go to California? Because I knew you were from here, but
Yeah, I grew up in Austin. I played in bands all through high school, college, and law school.
okay.
And but knew after law school that I had to try music full time, or I would end up being one of those midlife crisis guys who
right.
starts a real bad band when he's 45 and
Yeah.
embarrasses
We
himself.
don't see anything like
in
that around here.
families. So I went out to LA. Got lucky at first. Joined the band Spirit when Mark Andes and Jay Ferguson left the band,
Right.
and I became the lead singer and the bass player, and wrote 7 of the songs on the album entitled Feedback.
Okay.
And the single off that was Cadillac Cowboys. And shortly before we did the album, Randy California left the band. My brother was playing in a band in Austin with Tommy Shannon and
Okay. Yeah.
Uncle John Turner.
Half a double trouble.
Well, no, this was way before Double Trouble. Uh, in it was a band called Cracker Jack,
Okay.
and Tommy and Unc had left Johnny Winter. They were part of the Johnny Winter's big success when he happened, and so I got my brother to come out and join Spirit, and he was just 19 years old, and
Really?
he tore it up.
Nice. I can't remember what I was doing. I was 19. Something up to no good. Up to no good. So what was the last record that you bought? Do you remember? I mean, that seems to be harder for everybody. It's like this. It could be digital too.
It could be digital.
Yeah.
Well, of course, nobody's buying much anymore.
No.
They're streaming.
I know.
But,
This seems to be the tough question for everybody. Unless you collect LPs, people are like, "Well, I picked this
well,
up."
that's true. Actually, well, I'll tell you, one I was just given that have just a week ago that I need to listen to. I was told I need to listen to it, and I've read that I need to listen to it, and that's Bob Dylan's new album.
I've heard it's great.
But I listen to a lot of Brazilian music.
Really?
Yeah, because I went to Brazil 4 or 5 times and got turned on to some artists down there, and actually got to know this one samba act called Casuarina, and so much good stuff down there.
Yeah, I know. I think when I hear stuff like that, I really enjoy it, but I never dive into it. I don't know why. Just
well, I mean, I've always kind of just liked the little bit I'd heard, the Jobim stuff and all that. But by being down there, I got turned on to some stuff I didn't know about, and
right.
it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of one of those things when you're there, you kind of immerse yourself in the culture, and it's a little bit different, and you kind of bring it back with you. So, do you remember your first concert?
I don't know if it's the first, but I remember the band I was in high school. At the time, I wasn't a big country fan, but the bass player was, and so I went to some country shows that they had in Austin, and this was before you had hit records. The guy who was always the opening act was Roger Miller.
Oh yeah.
Because he was so funny, and then a couple of years later he started having hits. But one of the memorable concerts was seeing James Brown when Live at the Apollo was really had just come out.
Right.
And this was in Austin. And a friend, he was so new to at least the people I knew, I didn't even know who he was. I had a friend say, "Hey, my date canceled. I got an extra ticket. You want to go with me to see James Brown?" And I said, "Who's James Brown?" And he said, "Trust me, just come." And we went to Palmer Auditorium in Austin.
I was going to ask where it was.
And if you can imagine seeing James Brown at that time with the original Famous Flames and the whole thing, not knowing what you were going to see, I mean, it just took the top of my head off.
I can imagine.
It was incredible.
Yeah, I just watched a documentary on him. It was
and in those days, there wasn't security and all this stuff. We just walked backstage and talked to James Brown afterwards.
Oh, he talked to you?
Yeah.
This must have been earlier. Like you said, must have been pretty early in his career. Yeah. He seemed to be kind of a wild man towards the end there.
Yeah, but you could tell he ran a tight ship, because he was ordering his background singers and people. Hey, wait a minute. Stop.
Yeah, nice. So, into songwriting, that kind of stuff. What's the first song you ever wrote? Do you remember?
Wow, I think it was. It sounded like a poor man's Beatles song. I think.
No, I think it was,
but
I've
never recorded it. Actually,
can you play it tonight?
Someday in secret, maybe. But I did have one. One of the early songs was one that, in the summer of '69, I spent in New York City, and I worked for ASCAP, and someone came through the door one day and said, "Hey, anybody want 2 tickets to the David Frost show?" Which you may not remember. I don't know. But it was like an hour and a half show, syndicated nationwide. It wasn't network, but syndicated. And I had this one. They said Rolling Stones, it's rumored the Rolling Stones are going to be on there. And so I thought, okay, I'll take that ticket. And turned out they weren't on there, but Linda Ronstadt was, and the Gentle on My Mind guy was there. Who am I thinking of?
I know the song.
Wrote the song, yeah. And so he played a song, and they were talking about songwriting, and David Frost looked up out at the audience, and said, anybody in the audience write songs? And I said, yeah, I do.
You did.
Yeah. And he said, "Oh,
That's kind of
what
ballsy
kind of
to
songs
do
do you
that.
write?" And I said, "Well, there's this." He said, "Have you had songs recorded?" I said, "No, there's this one song that Atlantic Records is interested in one of their artists doing." But he said, "Well, what's the name of it?" And I said, "Well, hadn't named it yet, but I can play it for you." And he said, "Well, come on down." And so I go to John Hartford was the songwriter.
Yeah.
Right? You remember John Hartford?
Yeah.
And so I'm scared to death, but I go down there and he loans me his guitar and I play this song, which was I didn't have a lot of songs at that time, but this was definitely the best song I had.
Oh, yeah.
Called,
What was it?
Take Me to New York City. And it was appropriate too, because here I was, a Texas guy in
Right.
New York City at them. And this is probably the proving the rule of exceeding expectations. Probably not that I was so great, but exceeded the expectations of a guy coming out of the audience.
Yeah.
And so it got a real good response. And
that's not something organic that would be done anymore. It's just no way.
it wouldn't happen. And in fact, there was an English music writer in the audience who right afterwards said, "Oh, can we go ahead and buy you a cup of coffee and interview?" And I said, "What for?" He said, "Well, when this comes out, probably things are really going to happen for you." Or he said, "At least if this would have happened in England, that would happen." And as we're going down into the lobby of this theater, Linda Ronstadt came to find me and said, "Oh, that was really good." And I was so stunned by all of this. I didn't have the presence of mind to say, "Hey, can we get together later? I got some more songs."
Yeah, you were thinking about songs, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that was among the first songs I've written. It wasn't the very first, but
That's
it was
a great story, though. That's
well,
amazing.
I'll follow up by telling you that I didn't get to see it because the syndicated show didn't show in Austin, and it came out a few weeks later. And so a couple of people I knew in Houston, Dallas had seen it. Flash forward 30 years later. I tell this story to a guy working for me in the office, and for Christmas, he presents me with this, and back in the days of VHS, a VHS tape of the David Frost show.
That's crazy.
With me on it. He researched and found
That's
out.
the first time you'd seen it?
It's the first time I've seen it. And the postscript to this story is the last time I ever saw Doyle Bramhall, the father, not the son. This was out in Marathon, Texas on New Year's Eve. I was having dinner with some people out there at the Gage Hotel, and I see Doyle over there, and we wave to each other, and he comes over to the table, and he said, "There's something I've always wanted to ask you." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Were you on the David Frost show?"
That's crazy.
And that's unfortunately the last time I ever saw.
Doyle played here a couple of times. He's
He's
great.
great.
And he's super nice. He's such a nice man.
He's great. I believe it or not, I first knew him and Jimmy Vaughn when they were in the Chessmen from Dallas, when Jimmy was like 15, I think, or 16.
Yeah, there was a little bit of talent in that family, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So.
And then I was Stevie Ray Vaughan's lawyer when he got his record.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
So we could do this 2 factions of your life next time. Next time we'll get rid of my silly questions and we'll just talk about your life.
Yeah, well, actually, I guess we probably need to wrap this up. It's probably longer than you anticipated.
We can wrap it up if you like, but I appreciate you sitting down and talk to me.
Well, if you got another question, I'll.
Well, I was next one was just like what it's just like what's your first paying gig?
I can tell you that. First paying gig at the Austin Aqua Festival in 60 something. I was in high school. My band, I suspect that it was called the Bel Air Combo.
Oh, yeah.
We had flat tops. We had those matching plaid tux coats and these little continental ties across. And the only reason I think we got the gig is my parents were friends with the guy who booked the show. But we were on but the act that came on after us was Doug Somm,
Oh, yeah.
pre-Sir Douglas Quintet. But he and Augie were there, but this is when they had their hair slicked back, not doing the Sir Douglas hippie thing. They were in like sharkskin suits with their hair turned. And Doug wasn't playing anything. He was just out front singing. And I always remember he's singing some song, and he goes out to the edge of the stage, gets down on one knee while he's singing the song, reaches in his back pocket, pulls out a comb, starts combing his hair and looking at some girl standing out there. That was.
So you knew why he started music then?
And,
why everybody does?
And who would have, once again, flash forward another at least 30 years,
Right.
I ended up being Doug Somm's lawyer.
So that's another conversation we'll have. We're going to go back to that. So I'm going to do one last question with you. So I usually ask which songwriters kind of inspired you, but right now with you and kind of knowing the history, like, is there a Houston songwriters, a Mount Rushmore? Like, who do you think are those? I mean, towns comes to your mind pretty quickly. And
just historically or currently?
Yeah, just kind of like historically in the city of Houston. Like, who would you put as far as?
Well, obviously Towns was great, but to tell you the truth, I kind of missed the Towns era. That was when I was in L.A., and so I wasn't exposed to him that much. So obviously, I know the big ones, but I don't know, his whole catalog. Lucinda Williams, I got to know fairly early on in her career, but she may have, at that point, I met her already left Houston, but I know that.
So I didn't know she was a Houston girl.
She was for a while.
She was?
Yeah. And who else? I'll tell you, whoever was writing those songs back in the day for Bobby Blue Bland, of course, they all said D. Malone is the songwriter, but it was various songwriters who sold the rights.
Some factory somewhere.
Well, no, they sold the rights to Don Roby, who owned the Duke Peacock label. Right. And so he would just buy the songs and
he was kind of known to be kind of a kind of ripped everybody
But
off.
I mean, you look at I love all that music that came out of Houston at that era on the Duke Peacock label.
Did you watch that documentary that Dave Grohl did, where it was the one on Austin and Steve Earle was on it, and he was talking about, Austin had the singer-songwriters, but Houston, that's where all the musicians were.
Well, so. I tell you the truth. I mean, like I say, I grew up in Austin, and back in the 60s, I don't remember Austin being a hotbed of songwriters. Right. They were great players down there. Now, of course, Houston's always had great players too. In fact, Ray Charles was famous for saying, if you want to put a good band together, go to Houston. So for all the attention Austin, and I say this as an Austinite, but all the attention Austin has gotten is music mecca and all that. Houston's really a lot deeper. Right. It goes back further. There's a lot of famous jazz cats and so many great. But I don't think Houston has done a very good job of promoting themselves as a music.
I agree with you. And I talked to a couple of people I've done this with. I was like, why did you move? Why can't somebody create something here?
Don Roby did in that one genre of the R&B during that era.
Well, there's the hip hop stuff too. That's such a big
well, and there's the hip hop stuff. And really, what happened in Austin, the songwriter thing, I don't think really started happening to a big extent until the 70s. I think.
Right. The outlaw country.
Willie came. Yeah. Actually, when I left for L.A. in '71, and guys like that I knew, like Gary Nunn and Rusty Weir and stuff. Those guys were all in rock bands. I come back the next year or so, and they're all in cowboy hats and saying, "Hey, partner, how you doing?"
Here's where the money is.
And yeah, 'cause, yeah, Willie kind of got that whole thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was great. It was great for the town and created a scene. But before that, there were great players. My brother was one of them. He was one of the hot electric guitar players in town. In fact, Eric Johnson has talked about my brother.
Really?
And yeah, is one of his influences.
Wow.
He said it in Guitar Player magazine.
I have to compliment. It's quite a compliment.
Yeah,
Eric
well,
played here.
he was just a year or two younger than my brother, and
Okay.
He was. My brother was. I mean, he really.
He still is.
And he still is, but I mean, he was kind of a phenom at that moment in time. He would come home from school and say if there was a new Jimi Hendrix album, well, he would every day after school for about a week, and then he would have the whole album down note for note.
Yeah, those people made me.
It was Eric Clapton, the same. I mean, you want the BB King vibrato, or do you want the Eric? I mean, he was.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
He's really.
I'll have to tell him you were talking so nice about him.
Yeah,
or he can join and watch this. So I got 3 indoors real quick as we go out. I do this kind of thing where I put 2 bands together. You tell me your preference. Doesn't mean you dislike the other one if you like one, but the first one's the Beatles or Stones.
Love them both, but you got to say the Beatles. I mean, just for the body of work.
They seem to be the outright favorite. So Johnny Cash or Willie Nelson.
Wow, this stuff is hard.
Yeah, this supposed to be easy.
Okay, I'll go with Willie.
Willie, because he's from Texas, or just
from Texas. Also, Mickey Rayfield's a friend of mine, and the impact he had on is pretty unbelievable. Although, I mean, Johnny Cash. I mean, God, how can you really pick? You know.
Well, you just did. So last one, and I'll let you off the hook here. Elvis or Sinatra?
Oh man, that's tough too, because it's two totally different things.
I know. It's kind of such iconic people.
Love the early Elvis, but I guess I like all of the Sinatra era. The whole. So I'll say Sinatra.
Yeah, I think that's where I go to. So most people have picked Elvis, but I'm kind of on the Sinatra side. Well, thank you very much for sitting down with me. I appreciate it.
It was fun.
Staehely. We'll do it again. We got. He's got stories we got to get into.
Oh yeah, this could go on all night.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.